Victory has a smell. Every soldier knows it, every commander, every civilization that has ever fought a war and won. It is not the smell of gunpowder or burning metal, or the recycled air of a warship pushed past its limits. It is something subtler, something that exists in the silence after the last shot, in the stillness of a tactical display when the enemy contacts stop moving, in the particular quality of a breath taken when the worst is over. The Shevari Empire had smelled victory before. 31 times over 4 centuries of expansion they had smelled it. They smelled it now. Above the human world of Kerath Prime, 11,000 Shevari warships floated in the silence of a battle just ended. Below them, the last organized human fleet had been destroyed. 47 human warships, all of them gone. The battle had lasted 9 hours. It had been hard, the humans fought well as they always did, but the outcome had never been in doubt. 11,000 against 47. The mathematics had not required a genius to calculate. Supreme Warlord Davensoth stood on the bridge of his flagship and looked at the tactical display. No human contacts remaining. Oh, he breathed. Oh, he smelled it. Oh, victory. He was already composing the formal announcement when his censor officer said something. Something small, something quiet, something delivered in the tone of a person who has seen a number on a display and cannot make it make sense. Supreme Warlord, I'm reading contacts. Long range, very long range. Davensoth looked up from his announcement. Define long range. Edge of the system, sir, just inside the heliopause. All humans. Unknown as yet, drive signatures are, the censor officer stopped. They're not matching any drive signature in our database. Davensoth walked to the sensor station, looked at the display. At the edge of the system, at the very limit of sensor range, something was appearing. Not one contact, not tens. As he watched the number climb. As he watched it climb past 100. Past 1,000. Past 10,000. Past the total size of his fleet. Past twice the total size of his fleet. He watched it climb until the sensor system, running at maximum resolution, stopped updating in real time because it could not process the contacts fast enough. His censor officer looked up at him. Sir, she said, her voice was very quiet. I think we may have made an error. He looked at the display. He thought about 47 human warships. He thought about the word backup. He did not smell victory anymore. The Shevari had built their empire the old way. War conquest, the methodical application of superior force to inferior resistance. 4 centuries of expansion, system by system, civilization by civilization, until they occupied 104 star systems and commanded the largest military force in their region of the galaxy. They were not subtle about it. They did not pretend to be facilitators or administrators or peacekeepers. They were conquerors, they had always been conquerors. They wore it as a point of pride. Their military doctrine was equally straightforward. Find the enemy fleet, destroy the enemy fleet, occupy the enemy worlds, move on. It had worked 31 times. The conflict with humanity had begun for reasons that, in retrospect, seemed almost mundane. A Shevari expansion fleet had reached the edge of human peripheral space. Their survey teams had identified 17 systems they wanted. The systems were, in 3 cases, occupied by human colonies, small ones, recent settlements still in the early stages of development. The Shevari had sent a notification, as their protocol required. The notification said that the 17 systems were being incorporated into the Shevari Empire. The human colonies had 60 days to relocate. Humanity had responded that the colonies were not relocating and that the 17 systems were human sovereign territory. The Shevari had considered this response for approximately 4 hours. Then they had sent the fleet. This was how they had done it 31 times before. The notification, the refusal, the fleet, the occupation, the new systems were Shevari. The previous inhabitants either accepted that or they didn't. Either way, the outcome was the same. What had followed had been different. Not immediately. Initially, it had followed the pattern. Human border forces resisted. Human border forces were destroyed or retreated. The 3 colonies were occupied. The remaining 14 systems were surveyed and claimed. But then the humans kept fighting. Not in the way that defeated civilizations fought. Not in the desperate, disorganized way of people who had lost but hadn't accepted it yet. In a deliberate way, a structured way, in a way that felt Supreme Warlord Davensoth had thought more than once, like they were fighting exactly as much as they intended to fight. Not as much as they could, not as much as their backs-to-the-wall survival instinct. NCT demanded exactly as much as they intended. He had mentioned this observation to his senior staff. They had attributed it to human stubbornness, to cultural factors, to the particular psychology of a species that had a documented history of fighting long after the rational calculation said to stop. He had filed the observation away. He was now retrieving it. The battle above Kerath Prime had lasted 9 hours. The 47 human warships had fought magnificently. There was no other word for it. They had not fought to win. Davensoth, watching the tactical display for those 9 hours, had understood within the first 2 that they were not trying to win. 11,000 ships against 47. Nobody fought 11,000 ships with 47 expecting to win. They had fought to cost. Every maneuver had been designed to destroy as many Shevari ships as possible before the end. They had targeted command vessels, logistics ships, communication relays. They had used tactics that maximized Shevari casualties at the expense of their own survival. When the last human ship was destroyed, the Shevari had lost 216 vessels. 216 ships against 47. A ratio that, if Davensoth was being honest with himself, was embarrassing. And it was embarrassing in a specific way, not because his forces had fought poorly, but because the 47 human ships had executed their chosen objective with extraordinary precision. They had made him pay. He had thought at the time that it was a last stand. Pride, honor, the human cultural imperative to make their end mean something. Now looking at the contacts appearing at the edge of the system, he was reconsidering. They had made him pay because they needed him to have paid. Because what came next was going to require that he had already paid. His intelligence officer appeared at his elbow. Supreme Warlord, I have a preliminary analysis of the new contacts. Go ahead. Drive signatures are not matching human naval records, she said. They're not matching anything in our database. The energy output per vessel is, she checked her notes, approximately 4 times the output of the human heavy cruisers we engaged today. He processed that. 4 times, he said. Yes, and the contact count is now confirmed at, she paused, at 83,412. He looked at her. 83,000, he said. 83,412, plus or minus margin of sensor error. He looked at his fleet count. 10,784 after the battle, after 216 losses. He looked at the sensor display. 83,000 contacts, each one reading 4 times the power output of the ships he had just spent 9 hours destroying. He thought about 47 human warships. He thought about 216 Shevari losses. The ratio had seemed embarrassing. He understood now that it had been deliberate, that the 47 had been designed to cost him 216 specifically, that someone had done the mathematics. He thought about what those mathematics meant. If 47 ships, what he was now understanding to be the rear guard, the delaying force, the ships explicitly designed to die, had cost him 216. He picked up his communicator. "Get me the intelligence chief," he said. "Now." Intelligence Chief Soravel arrived on the bridge in 3 minutes. She was, Davensoth had always thought, the most consistently correct person on his staff. Not because she was infallible, because she was honest about what she didn't know. She looked at the sensor display, she looked at the contact count. She did not look surprised. "You knew," Davensoth said. "I suspected," she said. "I filed a report 6 weeks ago." "I read your reports." "You read the summary. The full report was 40 pages. She kept her voice neutral, professional. Page 31 contained the relevant section. He had been in the middle of a campaign. His staff filtered his reports. The summaries were thorough. Page 31. "Tell me what page 31 said," he said. She took a breath. "In every documented conflict with humanity over the past century," she said, "the pattern is consistent. Human forces resist. Human forces are defeated. The defeat is decisive and complete. And then—" She paused. "And then what?" he said, though he suspected he knew. "And then something else appears, something that wasn't in the original inventory, something that nobody knew existed." She looked at the sensor display. "The Shevari Empire, they destroyed the human frontier fleet, they celebrated. 2 weeks later, 120,000 ships appeared. The Shevari had enough to fight 20,000. She paused. "The Delan Federation, they occupied 6 human systems. They prepared victory celebrations. 40,000 human ships appeared. The Delan had 9,000. She looked at him. "Supreme Warlord, in 100 years of documented conflicts with humanity, there has never been a case where destroying the visible human force ended the conflict. Not once. Every time, what appeared after the visible force was larger, often dramatically larger." Silence. Page 31, he said. "Page 31, she confirmed. "My conclusion was that the visible force, whatever we were fighting, should be treated as a fraction of actual capability. I recommended delaying the final engagement until we had better intelligence on what the fraction represented. The recommendation in the summary was, continue operations as planned," she said. "The summary was written by my deputy. He disagreed with my conclusion. He believed the historical pattern was coincidence." She looked at the sensor display again. He was wrong. Davensoth looked at 83,000 contacts. "How long have they been there?" he asked. "The sensor data suggests they arrived approximately 4 hours into the battle," she said. "They held position at the edge of the system. They watched the battle. They watched the battle." He processed this, 4 hours into the battle, when it was already clear that the 47 human ships were going to lose. The 83,000 had arrived and held position at the edge of the system and watched. "They waited until the 47 were gone," he said. "Oh yes. Why?" She was quiet for a moment. "I believe," she said carefully, "that the 47 were not the last stand, they were the signal." She paused. "When the 47 were gone, the signal was complete, the message was sent." "What message?" "That we had committed, that we had used our force, expended our ammunition, taken our casualties, celebrated our victory. That we were," she looked at the display, "in the position they needed us to be in." He looked at the display. He had 11,000 ships, less 216. He had been celebrating victory for approximately 27 minutes. And at the edge of the system, 83,000 ships that read 4 times the power output of the vessels he had just spent 9 hours destroying were holding position. Waiting. Open a channel to human command, he said. The channel opened. The human officer who appeared was not what Davensoth expected. He had expected an admiral, someone senior, someone with the gravity appropriate to commanding 83,000 warships. He got a commander, young, human. She was looking at a secondary display when the channel opened, and she looked up with the expression of someone who had been waiting for a call and was unsurprised it had come. "The Supreme Warlord Davensoth," she said. A commander, he looked at her rank insignia. "I expected someone more senior." "Admiral Yenna Cross is available if you prefer," she said. "I was asked to take the initial contact." A pause. "We find that initial contacts go better when they're lower stakes on both sides." He processed that lower stakes. "You have 83,000 ships at the edge of this system," he said. 83,412, she said, plus the reserve elements that aren't in sensor range yet. "Oh, yet? How many in reserve?" he asked. "I'm not authorized to give you that number," she said, not apologetically, just factually. He sat with that for a moment. "The 47 ships," he said, "the ones we just destroyed." "Oh, yes. They were not your main force." "No. They were," he thought about Saravel's word, "a signal." The commander was quiet for a moment. "They were our border defense fleet for this sector," she said. "They were also, yes, a demonstration." "Of what?" "Of what you would face," she said. 47 ships cost you 216. We needed you to have that data before this conversation." He understood the math, the ratio, the calculation of what 83,000 ships at 4 times the power output would cost 11,000 Shevari warships. He did not need to complete the calculation. The result would not be a number he wanted to see. "What do you want?" he asked. "The same things we wanted before your fleet arrived," she said. "The 3 colonies returned to their inhabitants. The 17 claimed systems returned to human sovereign space." She paused, and a conversation about the 217. "A 217. 216 Shevari vessels destroyed in the battle," she said, "and the 61st human ship destroyed in the initial border action 6 months ago, the one that started this." She looked at him steadily. "We count our losses, we expect others to count theirs." Well, he sat in silence. "If I don't agree," he said. Oh, she looked at him. Oh, she didn't say anything. Oh, she let him look at the sensor display. He looked at it for a long time. "I'll need to consult with the Imperial Council," he said. "Of course," she said, "we." "LL hold position." A pause. "Supreme Warlord, the reserve elements I mentioned, the ones not in sensor range yet." "Oh, yes." "They're also holding position," she said. "They'll remain there for as long as the conversation takes." "A holding position." "Behind 83,000 ships." He closed the channel. He sat in silence for a very long time. The conversation with the Imperial Council lasted 6 hours. It was the most difficult 6 hours of Davensoth's career. Not because the Council was unreasonable. They were, once they understood the sensor data, not unreasonable. It was difficult because of the 31. 31 victories, 4 centuries of expansion. A doctrine built on the assumption that finding and destroying the enemy fleet ended the conflict. That assumption had been wrong here. And the evidence, if Sorvel's analysis was correct, if the historical pattern held, suggested it had the potential to be wrong every time they fought humanity. The question the Council kept returning to was, how? How had humanity assembled 83,000 ships without the Shevari knowing? How had they kept them at the edge of the system for 4 hours without detection? How had 47 ships, the visible force, the fraction, fought a 9-hour battle that looked exactly like a genuine last stand? Davin Soth did not have complete answers. Sorvel had partial ones. The drive signatures don't match anything in our database because they're not human drives, she said when he connected her to the council session. At least not human drives as we know them. The energy output suggests something more advanced, something they haven't used in any previous conflict we have records of. Why not? A counselor asked. Because they haven't needed to, she said simply. Silence. The hiding of the fleet, another counselor said. How? We don't know, she admitted. The contacts only became visible when they moved to the edge of the system. Before that, either they were beyond sensor range or they were present and undetectable. She paused. Both possibilities are concerning. Which do you assess as more likely? She looked directly at the display. Present and undetectable, she said. The trajectory of the contacts when they first appeared suggests they were already inside the system. They moved to the edge to be seen, not to arrive. They moved to the edge to be seen. To be seen. They had been present inside the system during the battle. They had been there when the 47 ships had fought. They had been there invisible, while Davensoth had committed his force, expended his ammunition, taken his losses, felt the victory. They had let him feel it. Counselor Mavseth spoke quietly. They were watching. Oh yes, Sorvel said. They watched the battle. Oh yes. They watched our fleet expend significant ammunition stocks against their rearguard. They watched us take 216 casualties. They watched us reach the victory moment. She paused. And then they moved to be seen. At exactly the right time, Davensoth said, when we had already committed everything. Oh yes. The council was quiet. In the silence, Davensoth thought about 31, about 4 centuries, about a doctrine that had worked perfectly for 400 years and had just encountered something it was not built to handle. We accept the terms, he said. The council did not object. The withdrawal took 3 weeks. The 3 colonies were returned. The 17 claimed systems were returned. The formal acknowledgement of losses was signed, with specific recognition of both the Shevari vessels and the human ship from the initial border action. Davensoth commanded the withdrawal personally. He watched his fleet move away from Kerath Prime, watched the 83,000 human contacts hold position throughout, moving neither forward nor back, waiting, patient. He thought about what Sorvel had said. In 100 years of documented conflicts with humanity, there has never been a case where destroying the visible human force ended the conflict. He thought about what the commander had said. The reserve elements are also holding position. He thought about what he still didn't know. How many ships were in reserve, what the drives actually were, how they had hidden an 83,000 ship fleet inside a system during a 9-hour battle, what the 4 times power output meant in practical combat terms. He didn't know any of it. He knew one thing. He knew the ratio. 47 to 216, the visible force, the fraction. He had done the mathematics finally. If 83,000 ships at 4 times the power output engaged his remaining 10,784, and if the ratio held even approximately, the number he reached was not one he wanted to put in writing. In the Shevari Imperial Archives, the conflict was recorded as Case 32. Every previous case had been recorded as a victory, 31 victories, 4 centuries of expansion. Case 32 was recorded differently. The archivist who wrote the entry was an old Shevari named historian Kerath. He had spent 60 years recording the Empire's military history. As he wrote the entry carefully, he recorded the facts, the 3 colonies, the 17 systems, the 9-hour battle, the 216 losses, the withdrawal. He did not call it a defeat. The Empire had not technically been defeated. They had made a strategic decision to withdraw based on updated intelligence assessments. He did not call it a victory. He called it something he had never used in 60 years of writing military history. He called it a lesson. Under the heading Lessons Learned, he wrote one paragraph. The Shevari doctrine of finding and destroying the visible enemy force has proven effective against 31 previous opponents. This doctrine assumes that the visible force is the primary force. Against humanity, this assumption is incorrect. What we can see is not what exists. What we destroy is not what remains. What we celebrate as victory may be exactly what our opponent required us to believe before showing us what they actually have. Case 32 should be required study for every officer in the imperial military, not as a failure, as a correction. We assumed the 47 ships were the fleet. They were the invitation. He submitted the entry. Then he pulled out the files on the Shevari Empire, the Delan Federation, the Kerath hegemony, the others. He read them with new eyes. He thought about 31 victories, about the civilizations they had absorbed, occupied, administered. He thought about how many of those 31 had been fighting humanity before the Shevari arrived. He thought about how many of them had smelled victory. He thought about what they had smelled after. He closed the files. He added one line to the Case 32 entry, at the very bottom below his signature. We are not the first to learn this lesson. We should be grateful we are still here to learn it.